Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
You know, there's something really captivating about walking along the beach, isn't there?
Oh, definitely.
That feeling that with every wave, something new, something different could have just washed ashore. And sometimes that something new turns out to be, well, truly extraordinary. Like that 50,000-pound gold nugget found on a UK beach.
Incredible story.
Or even those, staggering millions in gold coins from the 1715 treasure fleet that just keep turning up down in Florida.
Right. It really sparks the imagination, doesn't it?
It does. The whole idea that you could just stumble upon real-life treasure.
It certainly does. That allure of the unexpected find, it's powerful. And it taps into something kind of primal, I think. That sense of discovery, maybe a bit of fortune hunting.
Yeah.
What's fascinating, though, is that it isn't just about those, headline-grabbing discoveries. Even the more common finds, they have their own unique stories, their own value.
Well, today, that's exactly what we're diving deep into. We're talking all about beach treasures. But importantly, not just focusing on those once-in-a-lifetime finds. We're looking at what you, our listener, might actually come across on your next beach stroll.
Yeah, the practical stuff.
Exactly. What those finds are, maybe how to identify them, and even get a sense of, what they might be worth. We've gathered a really interesting collection of sources, covering everything from the natural wonders the ocean spits out to the man-made relics that time and tide have unearthed.
Right.
So next time you're by the sea, you'll be a bit more in the know about what you might be seeing.
That's the idea. Our mission today is really to equip you with the knowledge to maybe transform your casual beach walk into a potentially rewarding treasure hunt.
I like the sound of that.
We'll be your guides, sort of sifting through the info to highlight the common and the rare, giving you the insights to really appreciate the value, whatever that value might be, of what you find.
Okay, let's unpack this then. Let's start with the everyday stuff, the things you're most likely to see. Seashells, for instance.
Right, the classics.
They're probably the most abundant natural treasures you'll find, yeah.
Absolutely, yeah, by far.
And while they might seem commonplace, there's just a surprising variety out there. You've got those little colorful coquina clam shells.
Oh, beautiful.
The patterned calico scallops, and those bigger, chunkier whelks.
Exactly, and let's not forget sand dollars. Those fascinating flattened urchins that often appear sometimes perfectly intact after low tide.
Oh yeah, finding a whole one is always a treat.
It really is. They're just a testament to the intricate beauty of marine life, even in their, skeletal form. And what's interesting about shells generally is how their color and shape can sometimes tell you a little bit about the marine environment where they came from.
Then there's sea glass. Oh, I just love finding sea glass.
Me too. It's got a certain magic.
Those smooth, frosted shells, right? That started life as old glass bottles or bits of pottery jars. And they've just been tumbled and etched by the ocean waves for years and years.
Decades sometimes.
They're like little pieces of history, aren't they? Softened and made beautiful by the sea. So, okay, for our listener who's just maybe starting to notice sea glass, what are the absolute first things they should look for to tell it apart from just, regular broken glass?
That's a great question. The absolute key is that frosted matte surface.
Yeah.
Regular broken glass will still be shiny, probably sharp.
Right. Dangerous, even.
Yeah. Genuine sea glass has been worked over by the waves and sand for, potentially a very long time, giving it this unique texture. You'll also notice the edges are rounded, softened. Unlike the jagged edges of a freshly broken bottle, it's that slow process, erosion, and weathering that gives them that characteristic feel. And like you said, they're often prized for their beauty, used in jewelry. So even a common piece can hold a certain, maybe sentimental value.
Definitely.
It's worth noting, though, they are generally less common than seashells. You have to look a bit harder.
Now, something you might find a bit more exciting, perhaps shark's teeth.
Ah, yes. Always popular.
I know a lot of people actively search for these. Yeah. And in certain locations, apparently, you can find them pretty regularly, even daily.
Indeed. Their prevalence really depends on the beach's proximity to historical shark habitats and the erosion patterns there.
Right.
The constant shifting of sand can reveal these ancient remnants quite readily in some spots. What's fascinating is that the size and shape of a shark's tooth can often tell you about the species it came from, and maybe even roughly how long ago it lived.
That's cool. And speaking of things people might lose, lost coins and jewelry.
Oh, yeah, very common.
Definitely common finds, especially near the high tide lines in those really popular spots
Yeah.
where everyone leaves out their towels, right?
Exactly. That's prime territory.
I imagine a metal detector would be pretty handy in those zones.
Oh, absolutely. Metal detectors are a game changer for finding those metallic treasures that might be buried just beneath the surface. Rings, watches, loose change.
Yeah.
They're all frequent discoveries.
Yeah.
And beyond just the monetary value, these lost items can sometimes offer a little glimpse into someone's story, even if they'll never know the full picture, a lost ring.
Yeah, makes you wonder. Now, moving on to some of the more, let's say, unique natural finds. In the UK, for example, you might come across jet.
Right, the fossilized wood.
This beautiful black fossilized wood. Then there are amber nuggets, which are always exciting to find. And apparently, after a really good storm, you might even get lucky and spot a tiny gold nugget.
It happens. What's interesting about these UK finds is their specific geological connection to the land. Jet's formation involved, decaying wood under immense pressure over millions of years, often found in sedimentary rocks, like along the Yorkshire coast.
Look at jet, yeah.
Exactly. Amber, of course, is fossilized tree resin, and finding it on certain beaches tells you about historical forests and specific geological conditions nearby. And those occasional gold nuggets really highlight the power of natural forces, just redistributing materials eroded from ancient rock formations and carried by water.
Wow. And it's not just natural treasures, is it? You can also stumble upon antique and historical artifacts.
Definitely.
We're talking old glass, bits of ceramics, maybe even pieces of silverware or those old clay marbles.
The Victorian marbles, right?
That might have come from shipwrecks or maybe even just historic dumping sites from like over 100 years ago. Beyond the potential monetary value, what do these kinds of everyday objects tell us about the lives of people centuries ago? Maybe sailors or passengers on those ships.
That's a wonderful point. These aren't just objects, they're really fragments of past lives, aren't they? A piece of old ceramic might tell us about trade routes, pottery techniques of the time. A clay marble could evoke images of children playing centuries ago. These finds offer such a tangible connection to history, letting us sort of piece together little narratives of the past.
That's lovely. Then there are just the natural oddities, things like interesting crab shells, maybe sea beans that have traveled across entire oceans.
Incredible journeys.
Lightweight lava rocks like pumice, and the occasional, though usually not very valuable, pearl.
Right. These are the little curiosities that just showcase the sheer diversity of the marine environment and the forces shaping our coastlines. Sea beans, for instance, they're seeds or fruits that have drifted maybe thousands of miles, sometimes from the tropics.
Amazing.
Pumice, being volcanic rock, tells a story of geological activity far, far away from the beach where it washes up. Each one has its own little story of origin and travel.
And just rounding out the common finds, we've got things like hoof prints from wild horses on certain beaches.
Like in the Outer Banks, perhaps.
Yeah. Starfish that have washed ashore, urchins, and those intriguing hagstones, the stones with natural holes in them, often associated with folklore.
Yes, lucky stones. These miscellaneous finds really add to the richness of the whole beachcombing experience. They might not be monetarily valuable, but they certainly hold a unique kind of natural or cultural interest. Hagstones, like you said, considered good luck charms in some traditions.
Okay, so we've covered the things you're likely to see on a fairly regular basis. But what about those truly rare finds? The ones that make the headlines?
The big ones.
Let's dive into the rarest beach treasures. And of course, topping that list for many people is gold nuggets.
The dream find.
We heard about that 50,000-pound nugget in the UK. I mean, those kinds of finds are incredibly rare, obviously, but the potential is definitely there.
Absolutely. While certainly not a common occurrence, finding a gold nugget is kind of the ultimate beachcombing fantasy for many. It just speaks to that idea of instant fortune lying just beneath the sand.
Yeah.
These nuggets, they often originate from eroded gold-bearing rocks and have been transported by water over, very long periods.
Then we have amber again, but the really precious British amber that sometimes washes ashore after storms.
Right.
We even saw a mention of a 500-pound piece found on Cromer Beach. That's a pretty significant find.
It really is.
Yeah.
And what makes British amber, particularly from the East Coast, special is often its quality and its age. Finding a piece of that size and value is quite exceptional. Those strong storms and cold waters, especially in autumn and winter, are often key to dislodging these pieces from underwater deposits and bringing them ashore.
And we can't forget jet. that rare black fossilized wood we mentioned.
Yeah.
Really specific to the Yorkshire coast, particularly around Whitby.
Whippy jet, yeah. It's got a unique beauty and such a local historical significance. Jet's been prized for centuries, hasn't it? For its deep black color and its ability to be carved into jewelry, its rarity and connection to that specific area where specific types of ancient trees were fossilized under just the right conditions adds to its value.
Interestingly, there's also mention of Blue John, that rare blue gemstone from Derbyshire caves, apparently sometimes making its way to nearby beaches. That was a surprise.
It is a surprise. Blue John is quite unique, highly sought after for its beautiful banding patterns. Finding it on a beach so far from its origin in the Derbyshire caves would be an incredibly lucky strike indeed. Probably due to some unusual geological event or maybe historical transport that somehow ended up in the sea. Very unlikely, but possible.
Wow. And in terms of other rare minerals and stones, we've got Cornish serpentine,
Ah, beautiful stuff.
with its distinctive dark red and green colors found down on the Lizard Peninsula. Another very localized treasure.
Right. Cornish serpentine is valued for its aesthetic appeal and its direct connection to the geology of that specific region. It's often used in local crafts and jewelry, and its presence on the beaches there is a direct result of the unique geological processes that formed the Lizard Peninsula millions of years ago.
Okay, now let's shift gears a bit to some truly historic rare finds.
Yeah.
Historic coins and jewelry, specifically from shipwrecks.
The real treasure hunter stuff.
Yeah. The examples from Florida's 1715 treasure fleet are just mind-blowing. Gold coins, ornate gold chains worth millions, and recent finds still exceeding $1 million in value.
It's incredible. These shipwreck treasures represent such a tangible link to really pivotal moments in history. The sheer value of the gold, the artistry of the jewelry, it speaks volumes about the wealth and craftsmanship of that era.
Absolutely.
These weren't just everyday items. They were often part of vast colonial wealth being shipped across the seas. Lost fortunes, literally.
And it's not just gold and jewels from shipwrecks, right? You can also find other antique artifacts from wrecks or maybe dumped cargo that are centuries-old things like glass, ceramics, silverware, even those Victorian clay marbles again.
Exactly. Again, these are like little windows into the past. They offer glimpses into daily life centuries ago and can be incredibly valuable to collectors, historians.
Yeah.
Imagine holding a piece of pottery that was once used by someone hundreds of years ago. It really brings history to life in a way few other things can.
Definitely. And finally, a slightly more modern, but still apparently rare treasure. Rare Lego pieces.
Yes. This is a fun one.
Apparently, some were lost at sea decades ago from a container ship, and they're now quite collectible. Like the first Lego shark or black Lego dragons. Who knew?
It's a fascinating example of how even, everyday objects can become valuable over time, especially when they have a unique history or scarcity attached to them.
Totally.
It adds a fun, kind of unexpected element to the world of beach treasures. The story behind those lost Lego pieces is quite well known among beachcombers. Now, a shipping container fell off a vessel called the Tokyo Express in '97, I think, and these vintage toys, mostly sea-themed, occasionally wash ashore, especially in Cornwall.
So finding these really rare treasures clearly takes a massive amount of luck, but maybe also knowing where to look. Let's delve a bit deeper now into identifying some of these finds, starting with amber. There seem to be quite a few misconceptions floating around about finding it.
There are indeed. A very common myth is that amber is easy to find anytime you go to the beach.
Right, just lying there.
Yeah. In reality, as we discussed earlier, it's most commonly washed ashore after strong storms, particularly in autumn and winter when the seas are rougher and the water is colder, which helps it float.
Okay.
Another misconception is that amber is always yellow or orange, that classic honey color.
That's what I always picture.
Most people do. But it can actually come in a whole variety of colors. Red, green, brown, even almost black sometimes. So limiting your search to just yellow pieces means you might walk right past other beautiful, potentially valuable finds.
Good to know. What about this idea that any shiny or sort of translucent piece you find might be amber?
That's another key misconception. So many other materials, bits of plastic, weathered glass, or even copal, which is important to mention.
What's copal again?
Copal is essentially younger tree resin that hasn't fully fossilized into amber yet. It can look very similar, but it lacks some of amber's unique properties. So relying just on a quick visual inspection can be really misleading. Copal, for instance, will behave differently in some of the identification tests we'll talk about. And following on from that, the idea that amber is abundant on all beaches is just incorrect. It's typically found in specific regions with historical resin deposits nearby, most famously the Baltic Sea coast.
Right, Denmark, Poland, Latvia.
Exactly. You're much, much less likely to find it on just any random beach elsewhere in the world.
Okay, so location really matters. And color isn't the only indicator. What about size? Is it always big chunks? Easy to spot?
Not at all. Amber pieces can be quite small, sometimes no larger than a grain of rice, often hidden within seaweed or other beach debris.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Expecting to find large, obvious nuggets can lead to disappointment. Patience and careful sifting through those piles of washed-up seaweed and stuff are often required for successful amber hunting. And finally, it's important to understand that successful amber hunting isn't just casual beachcombing usually. It involves knowing about tides, weather patterns, and really focusing your search strategically after storms and in those specific known locations.
So timing and knowledge are absolutely crucial. Now, if someone thinks they might have found a piece of amber, what are some ways they can try to identify it for sure?
Okay, there are several tests you can perform, ranging from simple observation to slightly more involved methods. Visually, real amber often has imperfections, small cracks, tiny air bubbles, maybe even inclusions like insects or bits of plant material trapped inside millions of years ago.
It's a classic fly in amber.
Exactly, though usually much smaller fragments. It also tends to feel surprisingly warm and lightweight compared to glass or stone of a similar size. A simple test you can often do right there on the beach or easily at home is the saltwater float test. Mix about, say, 7 to 10 teaspoons of salt into a cup of water. Real amber should float in this dense solution because of its lower density. Most imitations, like glass or plastic, and even some types of copal, will sink.
That's a really handy trick.
What else? Another good one is the rubbing test, or static test. If you rub the piece vigorously on a wool or silk cloth for maybe 20 to 60 seconds, real amber should generate static electricity.
Okay.
And it will then attract small, lightweight things like tiny pieces of paper or even hair. Copal, because it's younger, might just become sticky when you rub it, but real amber develops that noticeable static charge.
Interesting distinction.
Then there's the hot needle test, but you need to be very cautious with this one.
Right, sounds a bit destructive.
It is, and it produces fumes, so do it in a well-ventilated area if you must. If you gently touch a heated needle, point to an inconspicuous spot on real amber, it should emit a pleasant, resinous smell, often described like pine or incense, and it will resist melting immediately. Plastic, on the other hand, will melt quickly and smell distinctly chemical and unpleasant. Copal might melt at a lower temperature than amber and have a slightly different, sometimes more acrid smell.
Definitely need to be careful with that one. Maybe try it on a tiny hidden area if you absolutely have to. Are there any other non-destructive tests besides the float and rub tests that are reliable?
Yes, the UV light test can be quite useful and it's non-damaging. Under a UV lamp, a black light real amber will typically fluoresce, often a bluish-white or a yellow-green color depending on the type. Many fakes, like plastic or glass, will either remain inert, show no reaction, or fluoresce in a completely different way.
Okay, that's cool.
Finally, you could try a solvent test, again with extreme caution and only on a tiny hidden spot. Applying a small drop of acetone, nail polish remover, or alcohol to real amber shouldn't really affect its surface. Copal, however, will often become sticky or tacky. Some plastics might show signs of dissolving or getting damaged. And just as a general rule of thumb, back to the feel, amber will often feel noticeably warmer to the touch than a piece of glass or stone at the same room temperature.
That's a really comprehensive guide to identifying amber. Very helpful. Great. What about sea glass then? How do you know if you found genuine sea glass that's been naturally tumbled by the waves?
Right. Genuine sea glass has a very distinct origin and appearance. It comes from broken glass items, bottles, jars, tableware, etc., that have been naturally weathered by ocean or sometimes lake water for decades. We're usually talking at least 20, 30 years, often much longer.
Wow, that long.
Yeah, that natural tumbling process where the glass is constantly being rubbed against sand, pebbles, rocks. It gives it that characteristic frosted, matte surface. That's very different from the shiny surface of, say, artificially tumbled glass or just freshly broken glass.
So texture is really the huge clue.
Absolutely. Real sea glass has a soft, frosted patina, kind of etched looking all over. You might even see tiny C-shaped marks under magnification. These are little abrasion patterns created by the sand and other particles aiding it over time.
Oh, okay.
The edges will be smooth and rounded, never sharp. And you might find tiny crevices where sand might still be embedded. It also rarely has perfectly round or smooth, uniform shapes. irregular forms that reflect its broken origin are much more common.
Right, it started as shards.
Exactly. Color is another important factor, of course, and it also plays a big role in its value, as we'll get into. Common colors like green, brown, and white, clear glass that looks white when frosted, are, well, common because those were the most frequently produced colors of glass bottles. Historically, beer, wine, soda, medicine bottles.
Makes sense.
But rarer colors indicate less common original glass sources or manufacturing processes from the past.
That makes perfect sense about the color being tied to historical production. What else should people look for when trying to identify real sea glass?
Well, the thickness and shape can also be indicators of age and authenticity. Older pieces, say from before mass production really kicked in, tend to be thicker and maybe a bit more uneven. That long period of tumbling in the surf also contributes to a more rounded, kind of organic shape overall. And pieces with unique features like embossing, raised lettering, or designs from the original bottle.
Oh, yeah.
Or distinctive shapes like intact bottlenecks or bases, those can be more valuable because sometimes they can even be traced back to specific manufacturers or time periods.
That's really cool.
It's also important to be aware of artificial or craft sea glass. This is often machine tumbled, sometimes just for hours or days, to mimic the real thing.
Oh, the fakes.
Yeah. This fake sea glass tends to have very uniform shapes, an almost too smooth surface that lacks those natural weathering marks, the pitting and C shapes you see on genuine pieces. It might also have edges that are still somewhat sharp, or colors that aren't typical of naturally tumbled glass, maybe too vibrant or uniform.
So if it looks too perfect and uniform, it's probably not the real deal from the ocean. Now, you mentioned color playing a significant role in the value of sea glass. Can you maybe elaborate on that hierarchy for our listeners?
Yes, absolutely. The color of sea glass is probably the primary factor in determining its rarity, and therefore its value among collectors and jewelers. As I mentioned, green, brown, and white clear are the most common, maybe a 1 to 10 rarity scale.
Okay.
Then you get into less common colors, maybe 2 or 3 things like olive green, often from older wine or olive oil bottles, amber from old Clorox jugs, medicine bottles, beer bottles, and pale or light green.
Still relatively findable, though.
Relatively, yes. Then it starts getting more interesting. Seafoam green, often from old Coca-Cola bottles or other early 20th century glass, maybe a 4. Then you get into blues, light blue, cornflower blue, sometimes from medicine or poison bottles, maybe a 5 or 6. Lavenders, which came from clear glass containing manganese that reacted with sunlight over time, also around that level. And some unique or odd shades of green.
Getting rarer now.
Definitely. Then you hit the really rare colors. Red is often cited as one of the rarest, maybe an 8 or 9.
Why is red so rare?
Because red glass production historically often involved using gold chloride, which was very expensive. So it was used sparingly, maybe for things like ship lanterns, signal lights, maybe some high-end tableware. Peach is also very rare. Vivid aqua colors, often from early to mid-20th century bottles like seltzer or certain fruit jars, are quite sought after. Lime green or chartreuse green, also very uncommon.
Like top-tier stuff.
And then at the very, very top of the rarity scale, maybe a 10, you have colors like pink, which also often involved gold in the manufacturing process and is incredibly scarce. Pieces with mixed colors fused together, oranges, grays, and something called flash glass, which has just a thin layer of color fused over clear glass, extremely rare to find intact after tumbling.
Wow, there really is a whole spectrum of rarity just based on color. It makes sense that the harder to find colors would be more prized. What about other factors besides color that influence the value of a piece of sea glass?
Good question. Besides color, the degree of frosting, or the overall matte quality and smoothness of the surface, is important. Heavily frosted, well-rounded pieces that show significant evidence of natural tumbling are generally considered more valuable than those with only a light frost or maybe sharp edges still remaining.
Condition matters.
Condition and shape, yeah. Unique or unusual shapes, pieces that retain some recognizable form of the original object, like a bottleneck with the lip intact, or a handle fragment, or maybe a glass stopper, those are generally more desirable. Thicker pieces, which often indicate older glass, are also preferred by many collectors.
Right.
And naturally, larger pieces, especially in those rare colors, are generally worth more than smaller fragments or chips. Provenance, too, if it can be reliably known, can add value. For example, a piece of sea glass known to have been found on a beach near a historically significant shipwreck might be more sought after by certain collectors.
That makes sense.
And you even mentioned certification earlier. There are reputable organizations that will certify genuine sea glass, verifying its authenticity as naturally tumbled and grading its quality based on color, size, condition. That certification can certainly add to the perceived value, especially for selling rarer pieces.
That's fascinating. I honestly never knew there was so much depth to sea glass collecting. Now, we've talked about amber and sea glass in quite some detail. What about some of those other valuable natural treasures you mentioned earlier? How are their value and identification typically determined?
Okay, well, let's start with shark teeth again. Their value depends largely on size, condition how intact they are, especially the serrations and the root, and crucially, the species of shark they came from.
Right, like the big one, Megalodon.
Exactly. Teeth from extinct giants like Carcharocles megalodon are particularly prized. A large megtooth, say over 5 or 6 inches, in excellent condition with intact serrations, can fetch hundreds, even thousands of dollars.
Wow.
Identification often involves recognizing the distinct shapes, the type of serrations, or lack thereof, the shape of the root, and the overall morphology characteristic of different shark species, modern and extinct. Beaches near fossil-rich areas with exposed sedimentary rock from the right geological era, like Calvert Cliffs in Maryland or certain beaches in Florida, Venice Beach being famous, are known hotspots.
And what about seashells? We said they were common, but are any particularly valuable to collectors beyond just being pretty?
While most common seashells you find have relatively low monetary value, yes, some species are more sought after by collectors for their rarity, beauty, or unique characteristics. For example, a perfectly formed queen conch shell with a vibrant, deep pink interior can be quite valuable, especially if it's large and undamaged.
Okay.
Rare or unusually patterned cowrie shells, certain types of scallops with really striking colors or intricate ribbing, and intact sand dollars of unusual sizes or species can also be collectible. Certain beaches, like Sanibel Island in Florida, which is famous for its shelling, or parts of the Philippines, are known for their abundance and variety of beautiful shells, making them popular destinations for serious shell collectors.
Driftwood seems like something you see almost everywhere on some beaches. Is it ever really valuable beyond just finding a cool piece for decoration?
Well, the primary value of driftwood usually does lie in its aesthetic appeal for art, crafts, maybe aquascaping or furniture making. Small, uniquely shaped pieces with interesting textures or natural weathering can certainly sell for decorative purposes.
Right.
Larger, more substantial pieces suitable for furniture, especially those with a unique grain pattern, or maybe from a specific type of wood, or perhaps with a story behind their origin, like wood from a known shipwreck or a historically significant structure, those can command higher prices. You're most likely to find good pieces near river mouths, where rivers carry wood debris down to the sea, or on rocky coasts after storms that have maybe uprooted trees or broken apart old wooden structures like piers.
We also touched on fossils briefly earlier. Besides shark teeth, what other kinds might you find on a beach, and what makes them valuable?
You might find various other marine fossils depending on the local geology. Things like ammonites, those beautiful coiled, shelled creatures.
Oh yeah, I love those.
Belemnites, which look like sort of bullet-shaped fossils, ancient shells of clams or snails, or even sometimes fragments of vertebrate bones from ancient marine reptiles or mammals. Their value really depends on their rarity, how unique the species is, how well preserved the fossil is, their completeness. A whole ammonite is obviously more valuable than just a fragment, and their scientific significance. Locations like the Jurassic Coast in the UK are world-renowned for their fossil finds, and certain species found there are highly prized by both collectors and researchers.
Coral fragments are so beautiful, and you often see them washed ashore in tropical areas. Do they have any significant value?
Yes, decorative coral fragments can be sold, particularly to people interested in coastal decor, or sometimes for use in reef aquariums. However, and this is really important, it's absolutely crucial to be aware of local regulations and international laws. Collecting coral, living or dead, is often restricted or entirely prohibited in many areas to protect fragile reef ecosystems.
Right, very important point.
Rarer types of coral, like black coral or blue coral, can be quite valuable in certain markets, but their trade is almost always heavily regulated due to serious conservation concerns. So, while you might encounter coral fragments on tropical beaches near reefs, collecting them might be illegal or unethical. Always check local rules.
Good advice. What about some of those more unusual finds, like mermaids' purses? They look quite unique.
Mermaids' purses, which are the empty egg cases of various sharps, skates, and rays, they generally have a relatively low monetary value. They're typically prized more by beachcombers, kids, and educators for their unique leathery or horny textures, their interesting shapes, often rectangular with little tendrils at the corners, and just their biological interest as the protective casing where a baby shark or skate developed.
Cool find, but not valuable.
Not usually in a monetary sense, no. You can find them washed up along sandy and shingle beaches, especially in the tidal zones after high tide.
And then there's the really strange one, whale vomit or ambergris.
Ah, yes. The floating gold.
We heard that can be incredibly valuable, used in perfumes.
It is indeed, potentially. Ambergris it's most likely to be found as waxy-feeling lumps washed ashore in regions known for sperm whale migration or presence. Identifying it for sure can be difficult. Lots of things wash ashore that look waxy, like fat or palm oil waste. And there are also regulations surrounding its possession and sale in some countries, like the US and Australia, due to protections for marine mammals.
So it's like winning the lottery of beachcombing if you stumble upon a good piece, but also complicated.
Very much so. A rare and potentially valuable but tricky find.
Any other surprising, valuable natural treasures that our listeners might not have heard of? Maybe more geological?
Yeah, there are a few more niche examples. Some beaches, particularly those with what are called placer deposits, accumulations of valuable minerals eroded from rocks and concentrated by water action, can contain things like rare earth elements.
Really? On a beach?
Yeah. These elements are crucial for many modern technologies, smartphones, electric vehicles. Finding a significant quantity as an individual beachcomber is highly unlikely, but the overall deposits themselves are economically important in some regions, like the beach placer deposits found in parts of India, Brazil, or Australia, mined for minerals like ilmenite or monazite.
Fascinating.
You might also find interesting geological formations that, while not traditionally treasures you'd sell, are unique and could have some value to collectors or for decorative purposes. Things like those dragon egg rocks found on the black sand beaches of Jökulsárlón in Iceland. They're rounded basalt rocks with these cool crack-like patterns, or maybe small detached hexagonal basalt columns like the ones famous at the Giant's Causeway in Ireland if pieces break off and wash ashore.
Cool geological finds.
And then you have the visually striking beaches themselves, like the pink sand beaches. The color comes from crushed fragments of tiny red-shelled organisms called foraminifera. Think Harbor Island in the Bahamas or Bermuda's Horseshoe Bay. The sand itself isn't typically collected or sold in large quantities, but the location is the treasure, in a way.
It really sounds like there's just a whole world of potential treasures out there if you know what to look for and where to look.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, for anyone listening who's feeling inspired now to hit the beach and do some serious looking, what are some general beachcombing tips you'd recommend to maximize their chances of finding something interesting?
Great, some practical advice. Probably the most important tip is timing. Go search after strong storms or during low tides, especially spring low tides, which recede the furthest.
Why then?
Because those are the times when the sea is most likely to have deposited new finds onto the shore, having churned up items from the seabed or carried things in from further out. Low tide exposes more beach area that's usually underwater.
Makes sense. Location.
Location is absolutely key too. Focus your search on rocky shores, where things can get trapped in crevices. Estuaries, where rivers meet the sea, are great because they collect debris from both inland and the ocean. River mouths, too. These areas tend to trap more interesting items.
Okay. Any tools helpful?
Consider using helpful tools like sifters or small nets, especially if you're searching through piles of seaweed or in shallow water where small things might settle. A magnifying glass can also be incredibly useful for examining small or intricate finds, helping you spot details that might indicate what something is or its potential value.
Good idea. Where specifically on the beach?
Always take the time to really look in those piles of seaweed that accumulate along the high tide line. Treasures often get caught and hidden in there. Tidal pools that remain after the tide goes out are also great places to check. And look around driftwood accumulations too. Things get snagged.
Right. Don't just walk along the flat sand.
Exactly. And finally, if you're serious about finding specific types of treasures, like fossils or particular minerals, do a little research beforehand on the local geology, the marine life in the area, and any known mineral or fossil locations near you. Knowledge is power. Oh, and crucially, always respect local regulations and guidelines regarding collecting anything from the beach.
Yeah, that's super important.
Some areas might have restrictions on taking certain shells, corals, fossils, or especially historical artifacts. Leave only footprints, take only pictures, or at least know the rules before you take anything else.
Great advice. Now, let's say someone does stumble upon something they think might be genuinely rare or valuable. What's the general guidance on perhaps selling their finds? Assuming it's legal to do so, of course.
Right, assuming it's legal and ethical.
Yeah.
The first crucial step for anything you suspect might be really rare or valuable is to try and get it properly appraised by a knowledgeable expert.
Who would that be?
Well, it depends on the item. For things like potentially antique artifacts, you'd look for an antiques dealer or maybe a museum curator. For rare minerals or suspected gemstones, a geologist or certified gemologist. For significant pieces of sea glass, especially rare colors or unique forms, there are experienced collectors and dealers who specialize in it. Suspected amber of significant size or with interesting inclusions, maybe an amber specialist or jeweler. It's definitely worth seeking out a professional opinion because the value can vary wildly based on condition, rarity, and current market demand.
Okay, get it checked out first. Then what?
For actually selling, online marketplaces like Etsy and eBay can be good options for reaching a wide audience, especially for, say, craft materials made from common finds like shells or common sea glass, or for selling directly to collectors of more common items.
Right.
However, for truly specialized or potentially high-value items, you might want to consider specialized dealers. Jewelers who deal in antique or unusual gems, perhaps? Fossil shops for significant paleontological finds, antique dealers, as I said, for historical artifacts, or even specialized brokers who deal in things like ambergris if you happen to be that incredibly lucky person.
Right, niche markets.
Exactly. Auctions, either online or in person, can also be a good route for particularly rare or historically significant items that might attract serious collectors and potentially fetch higher prices. But, and we have to stress this again, it's really important to be aware of and strictly adhere to any legal restrictions.
Especially for historical stuff.
Especially for historic artifacts, yes. Many countries have laws protecting archaeological finds or items considered cultural heritage. Shipwreck salvage laws are also complex. Some items may need to be reported to relevant authorities, like museums or heritage agencies, rather than being sold privately. Researching the specific laws in your jurisdiction is absolutely essential before you even think about attempting to sell anything that might have historical or cultural significance. Ignorance of the law is no excuse.
That's all really fascinating and provides some great food for thought the next time any of us are walking along the beach. It definitely makes you look at a simple stroll in a whole new light, doesn't it?
It truly does. Beaches are just incredibly dynamic environments, aren't they? Constantly being reshaped by natural forces, and in the process, revealing the surprising and diverse array of treasures. Both those things that are commonly encountered and those really rare, exceptional finds. Both natural wonders shaped by the earth and sea, and these fascinating remnants of human history brought back to light by the tides.
So to wrap things up for you, our listener, the key takeaway here is probably that the next time you're strolling along the shore, maybe take a closer look at what's around your feet.
Look down.
Yeah. With just a little bit of knowledge about maybe when and where to search and how to identify what you find, you can absolutely transform that leisurely walk into a potentially rewarding and certainly more engaging treasure hunt.
Absolutely. The ocean and the coastlines are just full of surprises, really, just waiting to be discovered by those who take the time to look closely.
And on that note, here's a little something maybe to ponder until our next deep dive. Now that you have a better understanding of what to look for, what kind of beachcombing adventure will you perhaps embark on? Will you be on the lookout for ancient amber washed ashore after a storm? Will you be diligently searching for that elusive sea glass in those incredibly rare colors? Or perhaps even dreaming of uncovering a lost gold coin or a piece of history from some distant shipwreck? The possibilities really are as vast and intriguing as the ocean itself. We encourage you to think about your own local beaches and what secrets, both common and extraordinary, they might just be holding beneath the sand and amongst the waves. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Why don't pirates ever win and hide and seek? Because good luck hiding when you shout air every 5 seconds, and your parrot keeps yelling he's behind the barrel. And that's all for today's dive into the deep blue where the treasures are shiny, the legends are salty, and the only thing more elusive than gold doubloons is decent Wi-Fi on a pirate ship. If you enjoyed unearthing secrets, from the sea with us. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. It helps us keep the sails up, the compass pointed straight, and the jokes at least mildly entertaining. Until next time, keep your snorkels dry, your treasure maps accurate. And always remember, if you hear someone shout yo ho ho, it might just be us dropping another episode. Stay salty, treasure hunters. Now, bring me that horizon hum 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 hum. Hum hum, hum hum hum. Hum 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 hum. Hum hum, hum hum hum. Yo ho, yo ho. A pirate's life for me, and really bad eggs. Drink up, me hearties. Yo ho, asterisk Y-A-R-R-R-R-R hiccup. Clang, clonk, splash, oof. Me peg legs stuck in the lasagna again. He ha ha, squawk. Polly wants a nap. Ya loud landlubbers. Toot toot. That be not the ship's horn. That be Carl after too much chili. Yo ho noo bonk. Snore, snore. Cannonball. Bubble bubble. Glug glug. Where's me rum? Done done. Done done. It's just Steve in the bathtub again. Bowing, splowing. Captain, the trampoline sails are a bad idea. Arg, I dropped me gold in the soup. W-H-E cursplat. Flap flap. Flop.1-eyed Larry's interpretive dance of the Kraken has begun. A-H-O-Y bless you. Wait, who sneezed? In the treasure chest,